I booked the place a few weeks in advance. It was supposed to be a small studio Airbnb just outside a quiet town in Northern California. I was driving up the coast alone, trying to take a break from everything. Work had been draining, my apartment felt claustrophobic, and I needed space. So I planned a solo trip. I chose somewhere peaceful and remote, but not too far from civilization. I didn't want total isolation, just quiet. The photos on the Airbnb listing showed a cozy studio with white walls, a small kitchen, and a forest view through big windows. It was part of a guest house behind a larger home, separated by a gravel driveway. The host, someone named Erin, had great reviews. People said she was helpful but gave you your space. I didn't plan to meet her anyway. I just wanted to be alone for a few days. I drove up on a Wednesday. The sun was low by the time I pulled off the main road and followed my GPS down a winding, tree-lined street. The houses thinned out as I went further. Then I saw it, an old wooden gate hanging crooked on its hinges, with a long driveway disappearing into the trees. The GPS pinged, "You've arrived." I double-checked the address. It matched. I turned in and slowly drove up. The house at the end of the drive didn't look exactly like the one in the listing. It was similar, same general shape, same faded green paint, but something felt off. It looked older, more worn down. The siding was cracked in places. A few windows were boarded up. I wondered if I had the wrong spot, but there was a small guest house behind it, just like in the listing. The studio. No cars were parked out front. No lights on in the main house. I sat in my car for a minute, engine idling, thinking. I pulled up the Airbnb app and checked the address again. Same one. The guest house had a small sign on the door with the number 14A, the unit I'd booked. That settled it. I figured maybe the photos were a little old. People sometimes cleaned up for pictures and let things go afterward. I grabbed my bag and walked up. The lockbox was hanging next to the door, just like the check-in instructions said. I entered the code, opened it, and pulled out a single key. The door opened with a stiff creak. Inside was cold. The place was darker than I expected, like the windows hadn't been cleaned in years. Dust floated in the air. The furniture was mismatched and old. Not vintage, just worn out. A small couch, a chipped table, a twin bed in the corner. The fridge was humming, but the bulb inside had burned out. There was a faint smell, like damp wood or mildew. I started feeling uneasy, like something wasn't right. Still, I was tired from the drive. I unpacked a little, washed my face in the tiny bathroom sink, and laid down. The bed creaked when I moved. The sheets felt cold and slightly damp, like they hadn't been used in a while. I kept telling myself it was just a rustic place. Not everyone updates their listings all the time. Not everyone cleans like a hotel. I'd be fine. It was just a few nights. That first night, I couldn't sleep well. I kept waking up to little noises, creaks, thumps, a soft rattling from somewhere near the kitchen. I told myself it was the old building settling, maybe raccoons or something outside. I had my phone on me, but no signal. I tried connecting to the Wi-Fi, but it didn't work. I gave up and tried to go back to sleep. The next morning, I made some coffee and walked outside to clear my head. The main house looked even more run down in the daylight. Shutters falling off, roof sagging. I noticed something strange. There were deep grooves in the dirt near the side of the house, like something had been dragged. I stepped closer but couldn't make sense of it. Probably some equipment or logs. Still, it made me uneasy. Back inside, I tried texting a friend, but nothing went through. I figured I'd drive into town later and get some signal. Around noon, I heard something. A door shutting. I looked out the window but didn't see anyone. Then, faint footsteps on gravel. Slow. I stood still, listening hard. Nothing. Just the wind. I walked to the door and opened it a crack. Nobody was there. I walked around the side of the guest house. Still no one. I spent most of the afternoon sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. Couldn't relax. Something about the place just felt wrong. Like it was abandoned, but not empty. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was nearby. That evening, I decided to drive into town. I needed to get out of there for a while, just feel normal. But when I got to my car, I found something that made my stomach turn. A piece of duct tape was stuck to the rear window. Not big, just a small strip near the corner. I hadn't noticed it before. I pulled it off, heart racing, and looked around. Still no one. The driveway was quiet. I got in and drove fast. I parked near a gas station, pulled out my phone, and finally got a signal. I looked up the Airbnb listing again. Same address, same photos. I checked the host profile and tapped on the contact button, but it was gone. The listing had disappeared, like it had been deleted. Now I was really panicking. I checked my email. The confirmation was there, the address, the unit number. Everything matched. But when I searched Airbnb again, the property didn't show up. I tried calling the customer support number. I was on hold for a long time. When someone finally answered, I explained everything, step by step. They asked for the listing ID, which I read off from my email. There was silence on the line for a bit. Then the support rep said that listing had been removed a few days ago because of a policy violation. She didn't have the details, just that it was taken down for safety reasons. She asked if I was still at the property. I told her no, I was in town. She said to stay in town and not return to the house, that someone would follow up soon. Then she hung up. I just sat there in the car, staring at the screen. The whole situation started to click into place. The weird condition of the house, the noise at night, the duct tape, the listing being deleted. I realized I might not have even stayed in the right unit. Or worse, I had stayed in the right one, but it had been taken off the site for a serious reason, and I'd shown up before Airbnb could notify me. I didn't go back. I booked a motel in town. It was nothing special, just a standard chain with buzzing lights and stale air, but I slept better than I had the night before. I kept checking my email every hour, waiting to hear something. The next afternoon, I got a call from a different Airbnb rep. They apologized for the confusion and said the host had been suspended for multiple violations, including failing to maintain safe conditions. They refunded me and gave me a voucher for future use. That was it. No explanation about what those violations were. No confirmation about whether anyone had been there while I was. No mention of the duct tape or the noises. Just a refund and a line about "we're taking the matter seriously." I haven't used Airbnb since, and sometimes I still wonder about the sounds I heard, about the shape I thought I saw through the frosted glass that first night, about the listing being live for just long enough for me to book it, then gone before I even arrived. If I had shown up a day later, maybe it wouldn't have been there at all. Or maybe someone else would have, and maybe they wouldn't have made it into town. I booked the place late one night while lying in bed, scrolling through listings on Airbnb. I had a work conference in Portland and figured I'd stay a couple extra days after. I wanted something cheap, quiet, and away from the city. Most of the listings were expensive or too close to traffic or had shared spaces. Then this one popped up. It didn't even have a proper title, just said "house for rent. Long stays welcome." The price was about half of everything else. The photos weren't good either. Grainy shots of a dimly lit house in the woods, like someone had taken them with an old phone just before sunset. Most of the rooms looked empty, bare walls and single pieces of furniture, but the kitchen looked clean and the listing said it had Wi-Fi, running water, a lockbox for entry, and a washer/dryer. It had 4 reviews, all of them short and vague but positive. Peaceful stay, good for focus, no problems, that kind of thing. I booked it for 4 nights. The drive there took longer than I expected. Once I got off the main roads, the GPS guided me through winding forest back roads that narrowed to a single lane in some parts. There were no houses, no gas stations, nothing but trees. My cell signal dropped about 20 minutes before I arrived. It was just before sunset when I pulled up to the place. A single-story home set back off a gravel driveway, surrounded on all sides by thick pine forest. The house looked older than in the photos. Paint was peeling around the windows, and one of the gutters was hanging loose. There was no porch light, and no sign of any other homes nearby. I parked the car and grabbed my duffel bag. The air smelled like pine and moss, wet and earthy. The code for the lockbox worked, and I stepped inside. The place was quiet, too quiet. No hum of a fridge, no ticking clock, just stillness. I flipped the light switch by the door. The bulb overhead buzzed for a second, then gave off a weak yellow glow. The air inside smelled faintly like old wood and something else, something faintly metallic, like rust. I walked through the house slowly. The furniture was minimal. A couch in the living room, a folding table in the kitchen, one bed in the master bedroom with a thin, flat mattress, a small desk in a spare room. The place was cold, and I noticed there was no thermostat, just a space heater plugged into the wall in the hallway. The bathroom had a working toilet and shower, though the water came out with a groan and spit rust for a few seconds before running clear. There were no personal touches anywhere. No books, no dishes in the cabinets, no pictures on the walls. It didn't feel like a rental or a home. It felt like something someone had emptied out and forgotten. I chalked it up to laziness, some landlord throwing it on Airbnb to make passive income. I unpacked a bit, plugged in my laptop at the desk, and tried the Wi-Fi. It worked barely, just enough to check email, not much else. Still, I wasn't planning to stream anything. I just wanted quiet to work. That first night, I heard something outside around 2 in the morning, a crunching sound, like someone walking on the gravel. I was lying in bed, wide awake because the heater kept making a clicking noise every few minutes. The window by the bed didn't have curtains, just dirty blinds that didn't fully close. I stayed still, listening. Could have been an animal, a deer, a raccoon, maybe a branch falling. It stopped after a few seconds, and I eventually fell asleep. The next day was uneventful. I made coffee with the cheap drip machine, opened my laptop, and got some writing done. Around noon, I stepped outside for some fresh air. I stood in the driveway and looked around. No cars had passed since I arrived. I hadn't seen a single neighbor or person. It was just trees in every direction. I realized how completely isolated the place was. That might have bothered me if I'd been in a different mood, but part of me liked it. I was tired of people. That night, I noticed something odd. When I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth, I saw that the mirror above the sink had streaks on it. Long, pale smudges, like someone had wiped it with their fingers. I hadn't noticed them before, but I assumed maybe I just hadn't looked closely. Still, it made me pause. I wiped it down with a rag and let it go. Around 3 a.m., I woke up again. I hadn't heard anything, but I sat up straight in bed, heart pounding, like I'd been pulled out of sleep. The heater had turned off and the room was freezing. I sat there listening. That same metallic smell was stronger. I got up and walked into the hallway. The whole house felt different, like it was holding its breath. I checked the front door, still locked. I stood there for a while, unsure why I felt so on edge. Eventually, I went back to bed. The next morning, I saw fresh shoe prints in the dirt by the side of the house. They weren't mine. I'd only walked in front of the house when I arrived, and these were clear prints in the damp soil near the back window. They led from the trees to the house, then back toward the woods. No reason for anyone to be out there. I stared at them for a long time, then walked back inside and locked all the windows. That day, I couldn't focus. I sat at the desk, trying to work, but I kept glancing over my shoulder. I thought about leaving early, but I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe the prints were old or just hikers passing through. I stayed inside the rest of the day and didn't open the blinds. That night, things got worse. I was lying in bed around midnight when I heard the back door rattle. Just a single noise, metal shaking in the frame. I sat up instantly. The heater was off again. The house was dead silent. I didn't move. I just listened. Then I heard it again. A slow creaking sound. Not the door. The floorboards. Somewhere near the kitchen. Someone was inside. I grabbed the only thing near me, my laptop, and crept into the hallway. I didn't turn the lights on. I moved toward the kitchen as quietly as I could. I could barely breathe. When I peeked around the corner, no one was there. But the back door, the one I hadn't touched since arriving, was wide open. Beyond it was just blackness and trees. I didn't think. I grabbed my keys, phone, and bag, and walked straight out the front door to my car. I didn't even stop to lock the house behind me. I drove down that long gravel road with my high beams on full, heart pounding so hard I felt sick. I didn't stop driving until I was back on the highway, signal restored, lights and cars and signs around me again. I pulled into a rest stop and sat there until sunrise. My phone had 2 missed calls, both from a number I didn't recognize. No voicemails. I checked the Airbnb app and opened the listing. It was gone, completely deleted. Not just unavailable, gone. The messages I'd exchanged with the host were gone too. My reservation history just showed a blank space for those dates. I emailed Airbnb support and got a generic reply about reviewing unusual listings. I never got a straight answer. I never told anyone the full story. I just said the place felt off. I didn't want to sound crazy, but sometimes at night I still think about the sound of those floorboards. The prints in the dirt, that open door. Someone had been watching. Someone had come inside, and I had no idea how long they'd been there before I woke up. I booked an Airbnb in a small mountain town in West Virginia because it was the only place I could find that fit my budget and had good reviews. I'd been laid off 2 months earlier and needed to get away for a while. I thought maybe a quiet place would help me get my head straight. The town was called Cold Pines, population just under 500. I'd never heard of it before. When I looked it up, the search results were sparse. Some pictures of woods and an old general store, but the house looked clean and cozy in the photos. Simple 2-story place, wood paneling, a gravel driveway, and surrounded by trees. I booked it for 2 weeks. The drive-in was already off. My GPS cut out about 10 miles before I got there, and I had to rely on vague screenshots of directions. I passed only 2 other cars on the way in. The trees got thicker, like they were leaning over the road, and the last stretch was just gravel. The town center was tiny. A single road, a gas station, and a diner with a flickering neon open sign that buzzed even through my closed window. When I pulled up to the house, it looked more worn than the photos. The paint was faded, and the porch steps had a soft give under my weight. Still, it was clean inside, smelled like lemon cleaner and old wood. There was a binder on the kitchen counter labeled house info with Wi-Fi details and emergency numbers, but there was no signal. I figured it was just the area. The first few days were normal. I slept in, drank instant coffee on the porch, and walked into town once or twice. The town was weird, though. People didn't really talk. When I walked past someone, they either looked away or stared too long. No one greeted me. I went into the diner once and felt like I'd walked into a private conversation that had just stopped. The waitress didn't smile. I ordered eggs and toast. They were cold when they came. The Airbnb didn't have a TV, which I knew going in, so I mostly read. But at night, the woods around the house got loud. Not like coyotes or bugs. It sounded like someone moving through them. On the 3rd night, around midnight, I heard what I thought were footsteps on gravel. I was upstairs reading. I froze and listened. Slow, deliberate steps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They stopped near the side of the house. I turned off the light and waited. After a minute or 2, I peeked out the upstairs window. Nothing, just black trees and a patch of the driveway lit up by the porch light. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon, but the sound had been too steady, too paced. The next morning, I checked the gravel and there were marks. Could have been boot prints, could have been nothing. I didn't have the nerve to ask anyone in town about it. That night, I locked all the windows and double-checked the doors. Around 2 a.m., I heard something again. This time it was a thud, like something heavy hitting the back of the house. I sat up in bed, heart going crazy, and listened. Another thud, then silence. I didn't sleep until the sun came up. When I went outside later, there were scratches on the back wall. Deep, long ones, like someone had dragged a stick or a knife along the wood. I should have left, but I didn't. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. I even tried to laugh it off. Told myself it was probably just some local kids messing with me. But things kept happening. I'd leave a light on in the kitchen and find it off in the morning. One day I came back from a walk and the front door was open, just slightly. I knew I'd locked it, The next night, something tapped on the upstairs window around 3 a.m. Just 2 quick taps, like fingernails. I didn't move, didn't even breathe, just stayed under the covers with my eyes wide open until morning. By the end of the first week, I started keeping a knife on the nightstand. I tried to leave then. I packed my bag and drove back down the gravel road. When I got to the town's only gas station, I pulled over to top off the tank. The pump didn't work. I went inside, but no one was there. The lights were on, the door was unlocked, but the place was empty. I walked through the whole store, felt wrong. I didn't take anything, just left. I kept driving. I should have reached the main road in 15 minutes, but I didn't. I drove for 30, then 40. Nothing but trees and gravel. Eventually, I circled back to the town. I knew I'd taken the right turns. I followed the same route out. I even passed the same downed tree branch twice. I parked outside the house and just sat in the car. I didn't want to go back inside. I thought about sleeping in the car, but it didn't feel safe. Eventually, I forced myself back into the house and locked everything again. I stayed inside the next day. I kept the knife with me everywhere. I didn't eat much. I didn't shower. I just watched from the windows. At one point, I saw someone walking between the trees. A man, I think, just standing still, then disappearing behind a trunk. I never saw him come out the other side. I took every curtain down that night so I could see out from every angle. The last night I was there, I slept on the couch in the living room. The upstairs just felt wrong. Around 3:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the front doorknob turning. Slow. Testing. I didn't move. I held my breath and waited. Then I heard the soft scrape of something sliding across the floorboards of the porch. Then nothing. In the morning, I found a dead rabbit on the porch. His neck was broken. No blood, just placed there like an offering. I didn't unpack anything. I threw my bag into the trunk and drove again. This time I went in the opposite direction from the day before. No GPS, no maps, just a guess. I drove until I ran out of gravel and hit cracked pavement. I didn't stop, even when I hit a pothole so hard my front tire bent. Eventually, I found a highway and flagged down a truck. I told the driver I'd gotten lost hiking. I didn't tell him about the house or the town. I just wanted out. Later, I tried to look up Cold Pines again. Nothing came up, not even on satellite maps. The listing was gone. My reservation history just said, location unavailable. The photos I had saved from the Airbnb app were gone too. Blank gray squares. I've tried to explain it to myself 100 times. I've told myself maybe it was some messed up community that liked to screw with outsiders. Maybe they were all in on it. Maybe I imagined parts of it because I was already stressed out. But I can't explain how I ended up back in the town after driving in a straight line, or why no records of it exist anymore. I still think about that house sometimes, about the silence in the town, about the rabbit. I've moved since then. I live in a city now, lots of people, lots of lights. I never book Airbnbs anymore, not even for a weekend. I don't trust quiet places. I don't trust small towns. And I don't trust being alone in the woods, because I've learned that when something feels wrong, it usually is. You just have to be smart enough to leave before it's too late. It started with an accident. I had booked an Airbnb in a small town just outside Portland for a long weekend to get away from work. I work in tech. Long hours, always in front of a screen, and lately I'd been feeling like my brain was starting to melt from the inside out. I needed quiet, fresh air, and no meetings for 3 days. I picked this place because it was cheap, remote, and looked clean. It wasn't a cabin or anything special, just a small guest house behind someone's home that was listed as cozy, private, and newly renovated. The reviews were positive, seemed safe enough. I got there late Friday evening. The directions the host gave me were simple, but I still had to drive up this long, narrow gravel road through tall trees for what felt like forever before I saw the main house. It was dark already, and there weren't many lights around. The guest house was around back, like she said. It looked decent, a little one-story building with a porch light and a small deck. No one came out to greet me, which I preferred. The place inside was minimal. A small kitchenette, a couch, a coffee table, a queen bed in the corner, and a bathroom. Everything smelled clean, but like overly clean, like the scent of bleach was still lingering in the air. I thought nothing of it. I dumped my bag near the couch, plugged in my phone, and lay down for a bit. That first night was uneventful. I made some noodles I'd brought, watched a movie I downloaded, and went to bed early. I didn't hear anything unusual, but the silence itself was kind of unsettling. No cars, no people, not even wind. Just dead quiet. I told myself I wanted this, peace and quiet, and forced myself to enjoy it. The next morning, I woke up feeling well rested. I made coffee, went for a short walk near the property, and saw nothing out of the ordinary. The host's main house looked shut, curtains drawn, no car in the driveway. I figured she wasn't home. Fine by me. I spent most of the day inside reading and journaling, just trying to clear my head. I didn't even go into town. That night, I stayed up a little later. Around midnight, I went to brush my teeth. That's when I noticed something strange. The medicine cabinet above the sink had scratches near the bottom of the mirror, like someone had tried to pry it open. I touched the edge and realized it was loose, like the whole mirror part could come off. I gently pulled on it, and sure enough, it popped open like a hidden compartment. Behind it was a narrow gap in the wall, maybe 10 inches deep. Inside, there were things. First, I thought it was junk, but I pulled them out one by one. An old disposable camera, a gold ring, a Polaroid photo, and a spiral notebook with a rubber band wrapped tightly around it. I laid them all out on the bathroom sink, staring at them. The photo was of a woman standing in what looked like the same guest house I was in, but the walls looked different, older. She was smiling, holding a coffee mug. The ring looked like a wedding ring. The notebook was what got to me most. It was packed full of entries. No dates, just lines and lines of someone's handwriting. The pages were stiff, like they had been exposed to moisture at some point. I shouldn't have read it, I know that, but I did. The entries started out normal, like a diary. A woman talking about how she booked the Airbnb to get away from her husband, how she wanted to clear her mind. Then things started to shift. She mentioned hearing footsteps outside the guest house at night. She wrote about waking up and finding the front door unlocked. She thought someone was coming in while she slept. The last few pages were frantic, the handwriting messy and slanted. She said someone had taken her phone, that she wasn't sure if she was being drugged. Then nothing, just blank pages after that. I stood there for a long time, not knowing what to do. I felt a tight knot in my stomach, like I had just read something I was never meant to find. I packed the items back into the compartment and shut it. Couldn't sleep that night. I left the light on and sat on the couch, staring at the door. Around 3 a.m., I heard something. It was the soft creak of wood outside. I froze. It was faint but unmistakable. I stood up slowly and moved toward the window, gently pulling the curtain back just an inch. Nothing, just trees and shadows. But I didn't feel safe anymore. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just nerves, that I had let the notebook get into my head. I packed my things and decided to cut the trip short. As I was leaving, I glanced back at the guest house and something clicked. The porch light wasn't on. I remembered turning it on the first night. I always left lights on when I traveled, but now it was off and I knew I didn't turn it off. My hand started to shake on the steering wheel as I backed out and drove away down that gravel road, heart racing the entire way. Back home, I tried to forget about it, but 2 weeks later, I couldn't resist checking the Airbnb listing again. The guest house was gone, completely removed, not even in the unavailable section. I tried to find the host's name, nothing. I checked my email for the confirmation. It was gone. No trace of the receipt. I still had the text instructions she sent me though, and the address. I Googled it. The property came up, but it was listed as abandoned. A real estate website said it had been on the market for 3 years with no buyers. The house and guest house were supposedly empty. I triple-checked the photos. It was the same place. I didn't know what to make of it. I called the local county office and pretended to be a potential buyer, just to get more info. The woman I spoke to told me that the property had been in probate after the owner passed away a few years ago. No one had been living there. No one was renting it out. She said I must have the wrong address. I didn't. I knew I didn't. A week later, a package showed up at my door. No return address. Inside was the spiral notebook, the one I had found. I never told anyone about it, not even my friends. But there it was, sitting in my hands again. I opened it, and now there were new pages. Not many, just a few. The handwriting was mine. I don't remember writing them. They were just short paragraphs, fragments, saying things like, "Don't trust the reviews," and "It looks different during the day." And one line repeated 3 times, "You were supposed to forget." I threw it out. I don't care how crazy it sounds. I burned it in a steel bucket in my backyard and poured water over the ashes. Then I deleted every Airbnb email I had, changed my passwords, and canceled 2 upcoming trips. I didn't want to go anywhere alone anymore. It's been almost 6 months since that weekend. I haven't heard anything else, haven't gotten any more strange packages. I sleep fine now, mostly, but sometimes, when I brush my teeth, I find myself staring at the medicine cabinet, just staring at it like I'm waiting for it to open. I haven't booked an Airbnb since. I started renting out the downstairs unit of my house on Airbnb back in early 2021. I live alone in a quiet neighborhood outside of Flagstaff, Arizona. The house is split level, and the downstairs has its own entrance, kitchenette, bathroom, and living area. It's separated enough that I hardly ever hear or see my guests unless they need something. It was extra money, and since I work remotely, I figured it made sense. For the first year, things were uneventful. A lot of couples on road trips, a few solo hikers passing through. I never had any serious issues. I kept a key lockbox outside, left a welcome note with the Wi-Fi password, and that was usually the end of my involvement. In October of 2023, I got a booking from a man named Calvin. No last name, just Calvin. He had no profile picture, and the bio section just said, "Traveling for work." He booked 5 nights, paid up front, and sent one message that just said, "Will arrive late." That should have raised red flags, but I'd had other guests like that. Some people just don't care to chit-chat. So I cleaned the unit like usual, set everything up, and didn't think much more about it. He arrived around 11:30 p.m. I only knew because I heard a car pull into the gravel driveway, headlights sweeping across the side of my house, and then a car door slamming. I was upstairs in bed. I peeked through the curtains and saw a man getting out of a dark gray sedan. He was tall and wore a black hoodie with the hood up. He didn't have any luggage, which I thought was weird for a 5-night stay. Just a plastic grocery bag in one hand and something bulky under his arm, like a rolled-up jacket or maybe a laptop case. He let himself in with the code, and I heard the door shut. That first night, nothing happened. I didn't hear anything from downstairs. The next morning, his car was still parked outside, but the blinds downstairs were shut tight. By the second day, I started noticing little things. I went out to get the mail and saw that my side gate, which leads to the backyard, was unlatched. I never use it. It's a heavy wooden gate that sticks and squeaks like hell. You have to really pull it to open it. I figured maybe he'd gone out back for some air. The yard's technically part of the listing, and it's not locked off. But on the 3rd day, things got more strange. I was working in my upstairs office, and I kept hearing these soft thumps, like something being dropped on the floor below. Not once or twice, but over and over in a weird rhythm. Thump, pause, thump thump, long pause, thump, like someone was dropping a ball or maybe pacing and dragging something. I went down the stairs and stood by the inside door that leads to the unit. I didn't knock, just listened. It went quiet as soon as I got close. Later that day, I checked the backyard again. The gate was wide open. There were shoe prints in the dirt leading around the side of the house. Someone had walked the entire perimeter of my home. They weren't my prints. I messaged him through the app asking if everything was okay. No reply. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my own front doorknob rattling. It was faint, but I live alone. There's no mistaking that sound. I didn't get up immediately. I just laid there, listening, trying to convince myself it was the wind. But then I heard the wood creak on my front porch. It's an old deck, and it groans under any weight. I got up and crept toward the front door. The porch light was on. There was no one there. I stood in silence for a long time. Then I stepped out and looked around. No sign of anyone. But I noticed that the motion sensor light by the side of the house, the one that faces the backyard, was on. That meant someone had walked past it recently. It doesn't stay lit for long. 30 seconds, maybe a minute. I stayed up the rest of the night. I didn't hear anything else. The next morning, his car was gone. Around noon, he messaged me for the first time since arriving. It just said, "Do you have a ladder I can use?" That was it. No greeting, no explanation. I didn't respond. I was getting a bad feeling about the whole situation. So I called Airbnb to report unusual behavior. They told me I could cancel the rest of the stay if I felt unsafe, and they'd handle the refund. I told them I'd wait one more night and see. That night, I locked everything. Windows, inside doors, even slid a chair under the doorknob that led to the basement unit. I didn't hear anything until around 3 a.m. That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs inside my house. Not the outside ones. The stairs that go from my kitchen down to the locked basement door. The one I'd put a chair against. I froze in bed, just laid there holding my breath. I heard one soft creak, then another, like someone was trying to move quietly, then a sound like a body pressing gently against a door, a slight vibration in the wood. I stayed perfectly still. After a long minute, the sound stopped. I didn't sleep after that. When the sun came up, I grabbed a small screwdriver and quietly unscrewed the inside doorknob to the basement unit. I didn't want someone trying to unlock it from the other side, even by accident. That's when I saw something strange. The metal strike plate on the door frame, the part the latch goes into, was bent slightly outward, like someone had tried to force it open from the other side. The chair had shifted maybe an inch. Not much, but enough to know it had been pushed against. I went around to the outside and knocked on the guest's door. No answer. I waited 5 minutes, then used my key and went in. The unit was a mess. Not destroyed, but weird. All the blinds were shut, all the lights off. He had taken the couch cushions off and arranged them into a kind of mattress on the floor. There were food wrappers everywhere, mostly protein bars and jerky. The trash can was overflowing, and the smell was awful. In the kitchenette sink, I found a rusted pair of needle-nose pliers. Not mine. On the table was a small black notebook with no cover. I flipped through it. Every page was filled with weird symbols, like tally marks and crude sketches of floor plans. One of them looked almost exactly like the layout of my house. I called Airbnb again. I told them I was officially canceling the booking and that I wanted someone to flag his profile. They said they'd escalate it. He didn't come back that night. 2 days later, I checked a local crime blotter online just to see if anything came up under his name. I didn't find Calvin, but I did see a short article about a break-in at a home 2 towns over. The suspect was described as a tall male in dark clothing. They found crude drawings of the house's layout in a notebook left behind at the scene. The homeowner had been away, but the suspect had broken in, eaten food, and moved items around before leaving. They still hadn't caught him. I never got a last name. Airbnb removed the profile shortly after. His car never came back, and I never saw him again. But for weeks after, I kept finding little things around the outside of my house. A cigarette but left near my back steps. A length of wire tucked behind the garbage bins. Once, I found a paper napkin under my doormat, folded in half and completely blank. I stopped renting the place out after that. I still live in the house, but I installed cameras, changed every lock, and boarded up the side gate. Sometimes, even now, when the wind dies down at night and everything is dead quiet, I hear the stairs creak, and I listen, heart pounding, for that slow, steady pressure of someone testing the door. So far, it hasn't come again, but I never sleep all the way through the night anymore. I I rented this Airbnb in Northern California last summer. I had some time off from work, and I wanted a break from the city. I didn't want to do anything fancy, just a quiet, affordable place somewhere green where I could read, cook my own meals, maybe go for walks. I found this cabin that looked decent. It was a little outdated but clean, and the price was low, way lower than anything else nearby. The host had good reviews too. His name was Ken. All the reviews mentioned he was quiet but helpful and respectful of space. I thought that sounded perfect. The drive up there was peaceful. Forest roads, pine trees everywhere. The GPS lost signal about 20 minutes before I got there, so I had to rely on the host's written directions. They were accurate, but it still felt like I was going deeper into nowhere. The driveway was just a dirt road, unpaved and full of potholes. The house wasn't really a cabin. It was more like a small ranch-style home with a tin roof and one porch light on. I parked, got out, and right away saw him standing on the porch. Ken looked like he was in his 60s. He had gray hair, longish, and a thick mustache. His clothes were stained. Faded jeans and a white t-shirt that had yellowing around the neck. He didn't say anything when I pulled up. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching me like he didn't know who I was. I waved, kind of unsure, and after a few seconds he nodded once and turned around, walking back inside. A few moments later, the front door opened again, and he gestured for me to come in. The inside of the house smelled like old wood and mildew. The kitchen and living room were combined into one big open space. There was a hallway leading to what I assumed was the bathroom and bedroom. Ken said in the listing that he lived on the property, but not in the same building. That was the part that threw me a little. I looked around and didn't see any other structure outside besides a half-collapsed shed out back. When I asked if everything was self-check-in, the listing said yes, but I figured maybe he just wanted to hand off the key. He gave me a metal key on a bent keyring and pointed toward the back of the house. The guest space, as he called it, was an addition built onto the main house with its own door. It had a small bed, a dresser, and a folding table with a chair. No TV. The walls were wood paneling, and the air smelled like mothballs. It wasn't great, but I didn't mind. I dropped my bags and went to use the bathroom, which was technically still part of the main house. That's when I noticed the door between his part of the house and mine had no lock on it. None at all. Not even a knob, just a handle that turned freely. I didn't say anything. I told myself I was overthinking it. I had a book, my laptop, and some frozen meals. I'd be fine for 3 nights. I just wanted quiet. The first night was uneventful. I made some pasta, read for a couple hours, and went to bed early. I thought I heard creaking outside the room a few times, but again, old houses do that. I tried not to be paranoid. The second day was when things started to feel off. I went out for a walk down the dirt road around noon. I was gone maybe an hour and a half. When I got back, something felt different. I walked into the room and immediately noticed that the window over the bed was unlocked. I was 100% sure I had locked it when I left. I even remembered checking it. I told myself maybe I was remembering wrong, or maybe the window didn't latch all the way. Later that evening, I went to get something from my backpack, my charger, I think, and I saw that the front zipper compartment was open. Not wide open, but enough that it was clear someone had opened it. I hadn't used that pocket at all. Inside, nothing was missing, but everything had been moved around, like someone had gone through it and then tried to make it look like they hadn't. I sat on the bed and just stared at the door for a long time. That door with no lock. I thought about leaving, but it was already getting dark, and I didn't feel like driving through the forest at night. I decided I'd leave first thing in the morning. Just 2 nights instead of 3. I felt tense, but I tried to act normal, just in case someone was watching me. That night, I pushed a chair under the door handle and stacked my suitcase against it. I figured if someone tried to come in, I'd at least hear them. I went to bed around 10 p.m. I had a hard time falling asleep, kept listening for sounds. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke up around 2 a.m. to the faint sound of floorboards creaking. Not outside, inside. I sat up, heart pounding. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I listened hard. It was definitely inside the house, slow, careful steps. They stopped right outside my door. I reached over and grabbed my phone, but of course I had no signal, no Wi-Fi either. I sat in the dark for at least 10 minutes, just waiting. The steps never continued. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I got up and turned the lamp on. The hallway outside the door was empty. My chair and suitcase were still pushed up against the door. It hadn't opened, but I was sure someone had walked right up to it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in the chair until the sky started to turn blue, then packed everything and got out of there before 6 a.m. I left the key on the table and didn't even try to find Ken. I just got in my car and drove, but I didn't go straight home. I drove about 40 minutes to a town with a coffee shop. I needed to be around people. I ordered a coffee and sat in the corner and finally pulled out my phone. I had signal again. I opened the Airbnb app and started to write a message to the support team. While I was typing, I remembered something. On the first night, I saw a door at the far end of the hallway that looked like it led to a basement or maybe the back of the house. I hadn't thought much of it, but now that I was thinking back, I realized there was a small camera mounted above that door, facing toward the hallway. I thought it might have been a smoke detector at first, but it had a tiny red light on it. Out of curiosity, I went back to the listing and looked at the photos again. There was no camera shown in the pictures, and when I checked the reviews more carefully, I realized all the recent reviews were at least a year old. All the good ones that said he was respectful were from long ago. The last review was 14 months back. No new ones, no updates. That felt strange to me. I contacted Airbnb support and reported everything. I told them about the unlocked window, the bag being searched, the footsteps, the camera, and the missing lock on the inside door. They said they'd investigate. I asked if they could tell me if the listing was still active later, but they said they couldn't share that kind of detail. A few weeks later, out of curiosity, I checked again. The listing was gone, completely removed. I Googled the address and tried to find any other rentals by the same guy. Nothing came up. It was like it had never existed. I don't know what his deal was. I don't know if he was just creepy or if he was planning something worse. I've thought about it a lot. Maybe he just liked watching people. Maybe he was waiting for someone who wouldn't notice the small things. Maybe if I hadn't put the chair against the door, it would have opened that night. I don't use Airbnb anymore. Not unless it's a place with tons of recent reviews and a clearly professional host. I stick to hotels now. I don't care if it costs more. I want a front desk, other guests, cameras in the lobby, not hidden in the hallway. I want someone to hear me if I scream. I booked an Airbnb in Pittsburgh for a week last October. I was there for a conference, and all the hotels nearby were either booked or insanely expensive. The Airbnb was in a quiet neighborhood, about 15 minutes from the city center. It looked nice enough in the pictures. Clean, modern, a little basement suite with a private entrance from the back of the house. The price was good, and the reviews were mostly positive. A few mentioned that the place was a little dark or not great for light sleepers, but nothing alarming. I arrived in the early evening. The sun was already dipping low, and the street was quiet. Just rows of identical brick houses with sloping backyards. The host had left a key in a lockbox, and I let myself in through the back. The backyard was small and fenced in, with a cracked concrete path that led down a few steps to the basement entrance. The door was heavy and painted dark green, with a dent near the bottom like someone had once kicked it hard. Inside, the place was cold. Not freezing, just that kind of basement chill that settles into your clothes. The space was clean, but cramped. Low ceiling, narrow hallway, and the faint smell of concrete dust and something a little musty. There was a small kitchenette, a bathroom with a shower stall, a twin bed pushed up against the far wall, and a small desk by a narrow window that looked out at dirt and weeds. I unpacked, set up my laptop, and tried to settle in. The first night was fine. I was tired from traveling, so I crashed early and slept through most of it. But around 4 a.m., I woke up for no clear reason, just wide awake in the dark. I listened for a bit. I could hear a soft, dull thudding sound, like footsteps above me. Someone walking slowly across the floor upstairs. Not unusual, right? People live there. But the footsteps just kept going back and forth for maybe 15-20 minutes. No other sounds. No TV, no voices. Just steady, slow walking. Then silence. I brushed it off. The next day I was out all day, barely came back until late at night. I showered, read a bit, and fell asleep. Night 2, I woke up again. Same time, that same sound. Only this time it didn't stay above me. I was laying there, still groggy, listening to the creaks above when I heard something new. A clicking noise from the laundry area near the back of the unit. There was a small utility closet there with an old water heater and fuse box. The clicking sounded like metal tapping against metal. Not fast, just one click, pause, then another. I stayed in bed, listening hard, trying to tell myself it was just pipes or something settling, but it kept happening. Click, pause, click. Eventually it stopped, and I must have fallen back asleep. The next morning I checked the closet. Nothing looked weird. The pipes were old, some rust along the edges, but no leaks, no signs of animals or anything like that. I didn't see any obvious cause for the noise. Still, I told myself it was just a building thing. Old house, no big deal. That night, I had a weird feeling even before going to bed. The air felt heavier. I can't explain it. Just that off feeling like you're being watched. The lights flickered once while I was brushing my teeth, and I noticed the bathroom mirror was slightly fogged around the edges. Like there was humidity even though I hadn't used hot water yet. Again, I told myself I was overthinking things. I left a lamp on by the bed when I went to sleep. Around 3:45, I woke up again. Not just awake. I sat straight up in bed like something had jolted me. The room was dead silent. Even the little space heater wasn't running. I reached over and flicked the light switch on the lamp. Nothing. It was off. I checked my phone. It still had battery, but the time read 12:09. That didn't make sense. It was clearly the middle of the night. I opened a news app just to confirm the time, and it loaded fine, showing 3:47 a.m. My phone's clock had reset. That's when I heard the clicking again. This time closer. It wasn't coming from the closet. It was coming from the hallway just outside the bedroom. I sat completely still. I hadn't locked the door to the unit from the inside, just the entrance door from outside. The hallway light was off and I couldn't see anything, but the clicking was there. Sharp, deliberate, like someone tapping a key or coin on the wall. I stayed like that, frozen, for probably 20 minutes. The clicking stopped eventually, and I forced myself to get up, turn the hallway light on. Nothing there. No sign anyone had come in. The outside door was still locked. At that point, I seriously considered leaving. But it was 4 a.m., I had nowhere else to go, and the rational part of me kept saying I was being ridiculous. Maybe electrical issues were messing with the clock. Maybe there were animals in the walls. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I contacted the host. Just a simple message asking if there had been any issues with the power or if the unit had ever had rodent problems. The response came hours later, short and casual. Nope, no problems I'm aware of. Maybe try keeping the heater off at night. It might be drawing too much current. I didn't reply. That night, I was too wired to sleep. I left every light on, even the ones in the hallway. I plugged my phone into a different socket, watched some dumb videos to kill time. Around 2 a.m., I heard a faint scratching noise from the bathroom. Not like metal on metal, more like nails or fingers against drywall. I grabbed my phone and turned the flashlight on. I moved toward the bathroom slowly. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was damp again, like someone had taken a hot shower. The mirror was fogged up more than before. I wiped it with my sleeve and saw what looked like 3 vertical scratches on the drywall just above the sink. Not deep, but fresh, like someone had dragged something sharp down the surface. I hadn't noticed them before. They weren't there the previous nights. I would have seen them when brushing my teeth. I stared at them for a while, feeling my stomach twist. That was it for me. I started packing right then, tossed everything into my bag, didn't even fold my clothes. I opened the hallway door to the main exit and noticed something strange. tiny shavings of wood on the floor near the doorframe. I bent down and ran my fingers through them. The frame had been scratched, same height as the bathroom wall. Not wide enough to be from a tool. It looked like fingernails. I left the lights on, locked the door behind me, and walked straight to a diner about 10 blocks away that was open 24 hours. I booked a hotel from my phone while sipping black coffee I couldn't taste. I never went back to the Airbnb. I left the key in the mailbox and messaged the host saying I had an emergency and had to leave early. I didn't ask for a refund. A few weeks later, I was back home and finally feeling more like myself. One night, I remembered the scratches and the mirror fogging up. I was curious, so I went back to the Airbnb listing just to see if anyone else had mentioned anything strange. The listing was gone. Not marked unavailable. Not currently off market. Just completely wiped. I Googled the address and found a zoning permit application from earlier that month. The property owner had filed for a remodel. The documents listed conversion of basement unit to single-family use only. Prior layout deemed non-compliant with safety codes. That was all it said. I never figured out who had been in the unit with me. If anyone, I didn't report it. I didn't want to get pulled into some drawn-out back and forth with the police or the host or whoever. But I haven't used Airbnb since. I stick to hotels now, no matter the price.